What if the queen that never was actually became the rightful queen at the Great Council of 101 AC? Let's get started. One vote at Harrenhal, and there it is. As easy as that. No wonder Rhaenys and Corlys were so upset for years after the council. If Princess Rhaenys was chosen as heir by the great King Jaehaerys, the dance never ignites, dragons never die out, and the bloodline that births Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen may never exist. Stay with me until the end. I will walk you through two possible endings. One where Jon is erased from history entirely, and one where he returns larger than legend, raised in daylight beneath a sky blackened by dragon wings. We will start with canon, clean and fast, so every step that follows rests on solid ground. Then we flip one decision and let the centuries bend. King Jaehaerys I, the Old King, ruled longer and more peacefully than any Targaryen before him, stitching roads between quarrelsome kingdoms and laws between older, harsher customs. Peace, however, spared no bloodline. His elder son, Prince Aemon, died. His younger son, Prince Balon, followed him to the grave. With the male line shaken and maesters whispering that uncertainty is a sword drawn by invisibles, the old king summoned the lords to Harrenhal in 101 AC to settle the succession before the realm burned the answer into itself. Two claims pulled hardest. Viserys, son of Balon, a man grown from the younger branch, but assuredly male, and Maester Velaryon, a bright boy whose right flowed through his mother, Princess Rhaenys, Aemon's daughter and the elder branch. The lords weighed sons against seniority, and when they chose Viserys, they did more than crown a man. They hardened an aversion to women inheriting and to claims through women. Years later, when Viserys named Rhaenyra as his heir, the realm was already primed to split along that earlier cut. In that refusal lies the slow spark that became the Dance of the Dragons. The passed-over claimant was Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Her mother was Jocelyn Baratheon, whose storms gave steel to Rhaenys' courtesy. Her husband was Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, whose oars had bitten foam from a dozen far seas. Her dragon was Meleys, the Red Queen, whose wings were a crimson verdict against any roof too proud to bow. She bore two children, Laena, the elder, warm as a summer wind over Driftmark, and Laenor, quick-eyed and bright. This is all canon, no speculation yet. Now we move the lever and listen for the grinding of time. Imagine the Lords crown Rhaenys in 101 AC. The moment she sits the Iron Throne, the realm's law must catch up to the fact of her body and blood. A woman is sovereign, yet Rhaenys does more than sit. She governs. Where Viserys hesitated, she writes. She codifies absolute primogeniture in the royal house. The firstborn inherits, regardless of gender, and the crown will no longer pretend that blood grows weaker when it passes through a mother. To make the law bite, she names her heir in public daylight, Laena Velaryon, Princess of Dragonstone. Not a promise to be tested later, not a placeholder until a male arrives. A fact. Protests curl up and die when Meleys spreads her scarlet wings above the Red Keep, and the Velaryon galleys lock the Blackwater like a second wall. Law, dragon, and fleet say the same sentence. The realm learns a new grammar in a single season. That one stroke strikes Daemon Targaryen like a hammer to a bell. In the world we know, Daemon ricochets between offices and battlefields and beds, as if the realm were a set of doors to be kicked open and slammed in turn. He outfits the city watch in gold cloaks, feuds with Otto Hightower, takes the stepstones, marries Rhea Royce, later Laena, and then Rhaenyra. He is the realm's most beautiful disaster, and his wake curls behind half the blades history remembers. Under Rhaenys, with Laena named heir early and openly, his orbit tightens. He still marries Laena, of course he does, but he is not a blade starving for a crown's attention. He is the steel at the heir's side, a king consort in waiting, if ever there was such a thing, and the crown's sharpest instrument as policy, not as provocation. The city watch reform is crown business rather than princely vanity. The stepstones, if he looks south, become a crown Velaryon joint venture. Dragons in the air, galleys in the straits, customs magic magistrates where pirate dens once laughed at law, and in private he is still Daemon, mercurial, hungry, quick to strike. But the throne teaches him the sweet taste of legitimacy that outlawry never could. It is not that he becomes gentle, it is that his ruthlessness is now bridle and spur, not bucking horse. With Viserys never crowned, Otto Hightower's ladder is suddenly shorter. Without a king to marry his daughter to, Otto cannot turn courtesy into a quiet coup. The Greens never coalesce into a faction because the fulcrum that lifted them does not exist. Alicent may remain jewels and dutiful smiles in Old Town, but she does not become the engine of a party whose colors half the realm will die for. Corlys Velaryon, instead of a kingmaker of hostile courts, becomes a cornerstone of the regime itself. His ships are not coins to be spent in secret, but pillars that hold up the hall. In this heir, the family tree hard forks. Daemon and Laena still have Baela and Rhaena, two dragon daughters groomed for statecraft instead of civil war. Viserys remains a prince of the blood, wealthy and honored, but not king. And Rhaenyra is brilliant without a crown, dragging knives into her orbit. Change one vote and write one law, and the geometry of green and black evaporates before it can form. The spark for the dance smothers in the cradle. Think of the dragons who do not die. Meleys never tumbles blazing out of the sky at Rook's Rest to paint a field with royal ash. Caraxes never locks in a murder-suicide with Vhagar above the god's eye, leaving fire on the water and grief in every story told thereafter. Vermithor and Silverwing are not dragged into the madness of Tumbleton, where banners blew over corpses and even courage began to sound like a curse. Moondancer is not thrown into a hopeless sortie for honor against inevitability. Young dragons are not butchered by mobs in the dragon pit, taught to fear more than revere by years of court rot and sudden famine. Removing the dance, the crown carries living flame into the next century. The Citadel adjusts its teachings, grudgingly at first, and then with habitual dryness, not on the nightmare of ruling with dragons, but on the licensing of riders, the governance of flight lanes, the stores of feed, and the fire breaks around cities. Queens govern power. They do not apologize for it. The map mutters into a new shape under dragon shadow. The Reach loves its gardens and its pride, but without royal in-law leverage and without a court faction whispering them into boldness. Old Town bows more easily to law backed by flame. Hightowers make peace with being grand, not decisive. The Westerlands keep their gold, but gold does not burn well, and Lannister pride is a poor shield when Meleys blankets Casterly Rock. A single demonstration over the Sunset Sea is enough to teach a lesson no letter could. The Riverlands, forever fields between larger teeth, welcome the absence of civil war like rain after smoke. The Tullys bargain hard for levies and roads, and receive both faster, because queens who keep dragons must keep the countryside fed. The Vale remains steep and precise. Arryns prefer contracts to songs, and appreciate that a crown with dragons is also a crown with schedules kept. The North remains itself, cold, careful, unsentimental, but a Stark knows when to make oaths and when to hold them. A queen with dragons is a monarch to treat with, not test, and the old pact is renewed with the ink of mutual respect, rather than the ash of rebellion. Dawn plays its game of centuries as only Dawn can. There is always a rumor of citrus and knives, but a realm unbroken by a Targaryen civil war offers fewer seams for a Dornish blade to slip into. Fewer wedges, fewer quick marriages made to burst like pricked fruit, fewer tents where spies can trade heat for secrets. Peace is never perfect. It is simply less fragile. Beyond Westeros, the butterfly beats its wings. Braavos, enemy of slavery and proud of its own kind of iron, regards a stable dragon realm with mixed calculation. On one hand, dragons frighten debtors and cities alike. On the other, a queen who backs contracts tends to make timely payments, and the Iron Bank prefers a payer with living weapons to a debtor selling jewelry in a panic. The free cities adjust their tempers. Volantis, forever staring into the mirror of old Valyria and telling itself heroic tales about what it sees, swallows its pride and counts coin, rather than gamble against queens with dragons. Pentos curtsies, Lys drinks to beauty and stays delicate. And Tyrosh invents attacks with a more flattering name. Qohor polishes its Valyrian steel and writes letters with too many titles at the top. The Triarchs cut their cloth to fit the new wind. Slaver's Bay keeps its lust for chains, but it learns that leather burns easily. The first galleys that try to raid too close to Driftmark come home as charcoal sketches, and the lesson passes down ship to ship faster than plague. The faith of the Seven, which has always had to make 1,000 compromises to live in the same kingdom as real dragons, learns anew how to bow and still keep its dignity. The High Septon writes a careful letter praising the Queen's fortitude and reminding the realm that the mother's protection extends to daughters as well as sons, and the parchment smells faintly of rosewater and strategy. The faith militant has been long put down, and in this calmer river, there is no reason to fish its bones out of the mud. The maesters in the citadel groan privately, because every law that makes the crown stronger makes their quiet letters slightly less deadly. But they also beam in public, because queens who like order like men who make lists and claim they invented order. Here is the deeper turn. In our world, from the ruin after the dance emerges Viserys II, the quiet mind in a house of loud swords, and from him Aegon IV, the unworthy, whose legitimized bastards become the Blackfires and ignite rebellion after rebellion. Those rebellions bleed the realm for decades, giving birth to sellsword companies, exiles, swamps of rumor, and a bitter wit that makes men speak of Targaryen summers as if they were mirages. In Rhaenys' realm, that line never crystallizes. If Daemon never leaves Laena to marry Rhaenyra, there is no Viserys II born of that union, and no Aegon IV riding afterward like a bad harvest. The seedbed for the Blackfire rebellions is salted before anything sprouts. Without Blackfire pretenders, the Golden Company does not form as a Blackfire exile army. A band of killers may still sell their swords in Essos, but they are not a home for a dream of stolen crowns. Without that banner, the Ninepenny Kings, if they exist at all, exist as a different beast. A problem for merchants and admirals, not a prophecy for boys. Erase those wars, and Aerys II, if he ever rises, does not rise in that shape. He is not fathered by a century of treachery, raised on fear, and taught that fire speaks more honestly than counsel. There may be tyrants later. There are always tyrants somewhere. But that particular tyrant, in that time, in that way, is not inevitable. What follows is a quieter realm with more dragons and fewer scars. It is a realm where another question can be asked without being met by laughter. What becomes of Rhaegar, of Lyanna, of Robert's Rebellion, and of Jon and Daenerys? I promised 2 endings. The first is erasure. In a realm where queenship is law and dragons do not die out, the specific chain of choices that births Jon Snow is snapped at the first link. Without Aerys II in that shape, there is no prince like Rhaegar in that shadow. Without Rhaegar as he was, there is no Lyanna's vanishing south as it happened. No crown of blue winter roses held high enough to set the banners on edge. No whisper that a wolf ran with a dragon to a tower where walls listened. Without that pair, there is no Stark babe, hidden as a snow in the bower of a god's wood. No quiet vow by a brother whose honor saves a realm at the cost of his own name. Daenerys, in such a stable line, is either never born or born into comfort. She is not a beggar queen crossing Essos with nothing but blood and a brother's promise. She is a princess among many, precious but not singular. Another link in a chain that does not break. The realm keeps its dragons, but loses the 2 souls who taught it how to deserve them. You gain safety and you lose the poetry that saved you. The wall still stands, and the snows still fall. And when the dead finally come south, because winter is not a Targaryen invention, the living may meet them with a sky full of wings. Yes, but not with the hearts that learned their courage by starving. Some victories are thinner when you have not paid for them. The second ending is convergence, but twisted. Dynasties drift. Even with good law and living dragons, human desire hums beneath the floorboards, and history has a taste for old shapes. Centuries after Rhaenys, a queen in her mold raises a prince whose grace becomes a problem all on its own. At a great tourney, Old Town perhaps, beneath the Hightowers' long shadow, for the sake of irony, he crowns a northern rose as queen of love and beauty. Honor bruises, and love refuses to be shepherded. They speak vows beneath stars and notaries, and a child is born. He is not hidden, not whispered, not named Snow to save his life. He is acknowledged because, in a world where Rhaenys normalized queenship, the crown can admit complexity without collapsing. A Targaryen Velaryon Stark prince is raised in public as a bridge rather than smuggled as a scandal. Call him John if you like. The name is the least magical thing about him. He trains with a dragon and dreams beneath heart trees. When true winter steps out of story and into soil, he does not beg the crown to believe him. He is the crown's answer, a boy who can ride heat and hear the voice of the old gods. And what about Daenerys? She is not born to exile. She is a princess of the dragon fleet, educated by queens who carry Rhaenys' steadiness in their marrow. She and our public John are not a secret rescue in a snow-swept hall. They are a state marriage braided with prophecy, policy, and good sense. Their union binds oceans and forests, oars and antlers, dragons and dire wolves, as if the gods had decided to write a treaty across the sky rather than in ink. Which ending feels truer to you? Trading two legends for a sky full of wings? Or keeping two legends and accepting the ruins that forged them? That is the bargain at the heart of this what if, and bargains always have a cost. In the world of erasure, 1,000,000 small lives bloom that would have burned. Fishermen who do not drown in wars, the crown started by blundering. Farmers who harvest wheat instead of bones. Children who grow into quiet old age without learning what it means to see dragon fire reflected in a brother's eyes. In the world of convergence, songs are sung that would never be written otherwise. Hymns to queens who never stopped being the realm's mother, to princes who crowned love without plunging a kingdom into knives, to a boy who rode a dragon with a Stark silent face and a Valyrian's bright danger. Each gain takes something with it. The realm counts blessings and misses ghosts, or else hugs ghosts and counts scars as if they were heirlooms. There are quiet casualties and hidden winners in both worlds, and it is worth naming them so we do not confuse banners for people. Without the dance, dragon seeds do not die nameless in pits. They become a standing aerial corps in crown colors, recruited by patient maesters and stern captains, licensed by law, trained to sit a saddle and a council table alike. Some never bond, and that hurts, but it hurts like a school instead of a slaughter. The Velaryon Navy turns pirate kings into prisoners of paperwork, which is a less romantic fate and a kinder one. The Citadel, forced to confront queenship as ordinary, writes sensible books that save foolish lords from themselves. The paragraphs are dry, but the fields they protect are green. The faith adjusts its homilies and discovers, to its surprise, that congregations pray just as fervently to a mother who sits a throne as to a mother who bakes in a cottage. Across the narrow sea, fewer princes flee with crowns in trunks. Fewer sellswords build reputations on Westerosi mistakes, and the Iron Bank's ledgers show fewer bold loans to desperate men who would rather set cities alight than tighten their belts. And yet, absence carves shapes, too. Without exile and hunger, there is no Daenerys tempered in fire. Without shame and oath, there is no Jon tempered in frost. Without Blackfire wars, Barristan Selmy may still become a knight of renown, but the particular song taught to him by the Ninepenny Kings is never sung. Without a mad king to make a realm into a school of cruelty, there is no one to show what loyalty costs when it is tested to the point of breaking. Stability dulls edges. Stability also saves fingers. We must be sober about the trade. If you love Jon and Daenerys because they rose from wreckage carrying a light they did not ask for, then the price of keeping them is keeping the wreckage. If you love a realm that does not grind its children into grist, then the price of that mercy may be the absence of two saviors who learned their work by bleeding. Neither answer is cowardice. Neither is treason. It is simply two kinds of love, for the living. Look north for a moment and let the snow hush the argument. The wall stands either way, a blue line between songs and screams. In the Erasure world, a queenly dynasty with thriving dragons can afford to garrison the Night's Watch properly, to ship dragon glass from Dragonstone by the ton, to send riders to burn dead woods so that the cold finds no cover it loves. Rangers ride under skies that thrum with distant wings, and the old bear can order a ranging with a fist that finally feels like a fist. In the Convergence world, the Watch is poorer, thinner, and more astonished by its own courage because help arrives less often and never in time. But a certain boy will walk its stones with a direwolf at his heels, listening to an old magic in the howl of the wind, and somehow that is enough to light torches that would otherwise have stayed damp. The others are not impressed by constitutions. They come when they come. The difference is whether the living meet them with dragons in the dozens, or with one last ember and a prayer that sounds like a name. Let us run the Rhaenys line for a few breaths, because imagining the quiet years is a way of honoring the people who would have lived in them. Rhaenys reigns with a deliberate hand and a sailor's sense for tides. She keeps Corlys close and the fleets closer. She hosts lords at King's Landing with tables that groan more from maps than meat. And she farms out inventories like favors, a bale of parchment to the Tullys if they dredge a canal on schedule. A patronage to the Manderley counting houses if they can prove they shaved exactly the right amount of tax and not a hair more. When Laena is of an age, the realm watches the naming feast with the soaring in their ribs that only dragon wings can give. Daemon stands behind Laena like a drawn bow. Rhaenys smiles like a woman whose gamble has already paid. In time, Laena will rule, then Baela, then Rhaena, and crockery will not break in the Red Keep every time a queen is displeased, because the habit of queenship will have replaced the novelty. The Iron Throne will look less like a dare and more like a desk. It is the strangest kind of miracle. Government working, and no bard writes it well because song prefers screams. Do not forget the Ironborn, those forever storms on two legs. With dragons overhead and fleets at sea, their longships become smaller, if not in wood, then in consequence. The old way learns new math. Raids die, where lighthouses throw dragon-colored beams across the surf, and watchers on towers echolocate with bells to count wings. Lords of the Iron Islands learn the words import duty, and discover, half by pain and half by profit, that there are honors awarded to men who bring goods rather than fire. Some still crown themselves on wet rocks with drowned words and gull cries, but fewer ravens fly from burning mainland barns, and fewer orphans learn to hate salt. The free folk across the wall have their own story, and there is mercy in the realm when dragons thrive. A queen with spare fire may choose to light signal pyres for diplomacy as well as for war, and a Stark who is not exhausted by southern treachery may choose to take parley seriously. Trade happens where previous centuries would have had arrows. A woman with a child, wrapped in furs the color of storm clouds, walks to a watchtower and returns with salt, and a story about a giant as gentle as a cart horse. The songs are different, but the people humming them are more numerous. Now I will hold the knife where it hurts, because all good history is honest. If you choose Rhaenys, you keep dragons, and peace and ships entering harbors exactly when their letters said they would. You also lose Jon and Daenerys, as you know them, either erased entirely or changed so much that the ache that made them bright is replaced with competence. If you choose Viserys, you keep the ache and the bright, and you pay for it with a century of mistakes, tall enough to cast their own shade. Harrenhal is haunted, not because ghosts are fashionable, but because decisions sit in stone for longer than their deciders, and sometimes the best you can do is become worthy of the world your choice made. Here is where I step back and hand you the quill. If Rhaenys was crowned, then what? Does Dorne marry earlier and change the seas? Does Old Town make peace with the idea that scholarship can exist outside its walls and invite dragon riders to lecture on heat and gravity? Does a young woman in White Harbor keep accounts so well that she invents a new profession and calls it something dull? And does that dullness feed 10,000 by forestalling a famine the rest of us never even hear about? Do the Ironborn Firstborn write their own treaties for once and discover that pride tastes better when it is baked into bread rather than chewed in brine? Where do the others find a weaker seam to exploit, and which steward notices the draft and stuffs it with wool before anyone else feels the cold? Your version is as honest as mine if you are honest about its prices. Now I want to hear from you. Finish this sentence in your own words. If Rhaenys was crowned, then, and tell me the domino I missed. Maybe you see a Reach that never forgives and learns to smile with teeth. Or a Lannister who falls in love with administration and becomes the most dangerous man in the realm by never once drawing a sword. Maybe you see Daemon older and surprisingly patient, teaching Baelor that a quick strike is useful, but a long kindness changes. More maps. Maybe you see a princess of the Dragon Fleet who grows up with salt in her hair and policy in her pockets, and who never once doubts that she belongs where she stands. And if you want the extended cut, where we run the dynasty decade by decade, from Laena to Baelor to Rhaena, and assign dragons and admirals and treaties and tourneys as the years roll, say the words in your heart, and I will find them on the page. There is another vote waiting to be flipped somewhere in the vastness of Westeros, and the North is not the only land that keeps its secrets under snow.